This is Counterpoint, and I'm your host, Tanya Granick-Allen. We have our current events panel with us today with lots of commentary on current affairs. We'll cover the Air Canada strike that almost was and why we're seeing more strikes in Canada. We'll discuss the NDP leader, Jagmeet Singh, calling off his deal with the Liberals. We'll dive into the BC election happening in October. We'll cover the Canadian Army sleeping bag fiasco. What's that all about? And finally, we'll discuss a controversial film at the Toronto International Film Festival, which was suspended and then resumed again. Lots to get through, and joining me now is Mike Patton, political commentator, and Michelle Simard, lawyer, privacy and cybersecurity specialist. Good morning, good afternoon. Thank you both for joining me. I appreciate your time today.
Thank you.
Excellent. Well, let's dive right in. And I want to start actually with the sleeping bag fiasco. And I'm thinking, what on earth is this about? I have the details, but Mike, why don't you start us off?
Well, the Canadian Army is a four-season occupation. And if you're in the infantry, that means you're outside all year long and you may have to sleep outside. So it's a four-season occupation, and the Canadian Army bought a three-season sleeping bag, not warm enough for the winter. So where does that leave our poor men and women on the front line?
And it wasn't an inexpensive purchase either. I will like to let you know that it's a $34.8 million acquisition. That's how much these ineffective sleeping bags are. And Michelle, will bring you into this. The military doesn't only serve in Victoria, British Columbia, the warmest part in this country. They're in the Arctic sometimes.
Well, to me, I look at it as a personal, everyday person. Forget about being a political commentator or as a lawyer. I'm sitting there going, like, if you have a job, you'd expect your employer, forget it's the government of Canada, to actually issue equipment that is appropriate for what you have to do in your job to effectively do your job. The last thing we wanted from our frontline military is to say that they can't do the job, or they're suffering, or they have injuries. And I'm sitting there going, like, was this a miss? And I'm like, 100% it was a miss. I'm like, you cut corners on every angle. I'm like, but this is the one you shouldn't have. As Mike said, this is a four-season occupation. What were you doing and what were you thinking? This is the one thing you shouldn't. And the amount of money you spent, come on, get it right, get it right.
But Mike, again, to throw back to you, it seems that the Department of National Defense seems to be plagued when it comes to procurement and RFPs and spending. We know we need parts for our fighter jets that are aging. We remember the Navy, the drama with the Navy dealing with their frigates and acquisitions and the dud subs. It seems this department in particular seems to have problems.
Yeah, the sleeping bag issue is almost humorous in the sense that it's a fail. When I was in the infantry, we had sleeping bags that had been, I think, first purchased in the 60s, and they were old, but they were warm. The fact that these guys could not even go to Canadian Tire and buy appropriate sleeping bags is a real concern when you start thinking about it's the same people who bought these sleeping bags that are going to buy parts for the jets, parts for ships, parts for submarines, parts for things that explode. It's not a good look on the Canadian military at all.
No, definitely not. And speaking of those 1960s sleeping bags, that is what the soldiers have reverted to using, especially up in the Arctic. They said, let's go back to the ones we had, 60 years ago.
Yeah, it's crazy. They were long and skinny, and they had a hood, and it was sort of like being in sort of a mummy situation. But they were warm. They were down-filled. They were good sleeping bags. It's unfortunate that they could not replace them with something better after all these years.
So, Michelle, and the final point on this, and we'll go to commercial, but why can't the government get it right? I mean, we have so many bureaucrats. It seems that the bureaucracy is ballooning, yet then we have issues like this. And 34.8 million is not chump change. That's some significant money here. Why can't the government get it right?
Well, somebody who worked temporarily for government, I can say this. I think there's a directive that comes from elected politicians, and then the bureaucracy takes heed of what they say. And then what they try to do is they try to cut corners and costs. And as a result, they don't know any better. They don't test it out. They don't look at it. They look at, honestly, at this day, reviews. And really, that's not good enough. We expect more and we need more. And unfortunately, this is where we're at. And this is where our country's gone down the toilet. So at the end of the day, I always tell everybody, choose your government wisely.
Okay, on that note, we'll be right back.